Good evening. I'm Michelle Karlenzig with your Weekend National News Update. It's been over a month since the killings of Chantal Moore and Rodney Levi. Investigations by Quebec's independent investigators are underway. But what kind of justice can victims expect from police violence? As Jamie Pashagumskum reports, some say they know the answer to that question.
Not having much hope with some action, because, you know, we've been asking for this for quite some time.
Moses Martin is the chief of the Tlayoquat First Nation in BC and was Chantal Moore's great-uncle. He says he's skeptical because of a lack of transparency.
I'd love to get some answers as to what's going on, because, you know, we hear nothing. Not a peep out of any action, if there is action going on, investigations going on.
Indigenous lawyer Pam Palmater says independent investigators are usually white, male, ex-police officers.
Well, the First Nation families in New Brunswick can't really expect any kind of justice under the current system as it's structured.
Palmater suggests not using ex-police officers on oversight committees.
If you're talking about someone who can do a thorough investigation, an examination, a review of the facts, a review of policies, there's lots of categories of people that can do that. You've got lawyers, you've got journalists, you've got social workers, you've got people skilled in investigations in general, you've got community leaders who've long worked in these areas.
Independent investigators have stated that ex-police officers are used due to their experience in policing. Chief Martin says if they have to be police officers, why not use retired Indigenous officers?
Those are the people that I'm talking about. They know the system and they know the work that they do and get involved with. So it would make sense to have them involved as part of the investigation.
Martin sent a request to Public Safety Minister Bill Blair in June asking for an Indigenous-led investigation, but never got a response. In an email to APTN, Bill Blair's office said that neither of the cases being investigated is federal jurisdiction. APTN reached out to the Quebec investigators involved in both Chantal Moore and Rodney Levi's cases. The Bureau Enquête Indépendante wouldn't say how many people of color are involved in the investigations, but did say half of their investigators are ex-police. Meanwhile, a coroner's inquest has been called for in the case of Rodney Levi. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The Native Women's Association of Canada says they've written to Chantal Moore's family to support their call for a public inquiry into her death. Moore was shot and killed by police on June 4th during a wellness check in New Brunswick. Quebec's independent police watchdog will examine why the visit by Edmundston police turned fatal. Moore's family, however, says a public inquiry will have the ability to make findings of misconduct. NWAC President Lorraine Whitman wants the officials to pull back the curtain in this case because a coroner's inquest alone will not go far enough.
All Canadian people need to understand the systemic racism that's existing, and everyone needs to know these facts because they're missing gaps, missing links. And we need to know, and the mother needs to know for closure, and someone needs to be accountable. And we need to speak and be there and be the voice of Chantal, who isn't here to speak.
11 Indigenous children have died since March in Ontario. All had some sort of involvement with the child welfare system. An APTN investigation shows that Indigenous children make up a third of all deaths connected to the state. That's 172 Indigenous children and youth since 2013. Manitoba also collects similar data with its own child protection services. As Brittany Hobson shows, it's similar grim tale.
This February marked the 10-year anniversary of Cassandra Wood's death. Helena Wood wanted to commemorate the day in a special way. For the first time since Cassandra's passing, Wood took her other children back home to St. Teresa Point First Nation for a feast and to visit the site where Cassandra was found.
It was closure for us. And we finally closed it, right? And just for us and to talk about her and went to go see the site.
Cassandra died by suicide at the age of 15. The teen witnessed years of domestic violence in the home and sought support along the way, but Wood says this never came.
back then, they didn't have that kind of resources, you know. They didn't know what to do.
Cassandra is not alone. She's one of many children and youth who have died in the province from 2009 to 2019. According to statistics from the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth, 1,605 youth have died in Manitoba in the last decade. Of those, 590 are what the Advocate calls reviewable deaths, meaning the person had some contact with the child welfare system within the past year of their life. In total, 131 were classified as in government care at the time of their death. Death by suicide continues to be the leading cause of death for youth in Manitoba. Wood says Cassandra never saw a therapist, despite telling others about what was going on at home.
There's always a waiting list for a doctor, waiting list for a therapist, and we need more therapists out there.
Manitoba Advocate Daphne Penrose has repeatedly called for easier access to mental health resources, especially in First Nations.
So how do we help kids with mental health issues, or help them regulate some of the issues that they're having with supports that are close to their home, them and their families, and to be able to have communities decide about what resources they need so that they can provide meaningful help to their kids.
In Manitoba, there are 10 to 11,000 kids in care in any given year. 90% are Indigenous. Penrose's office does not keep track of how many of the deaths are Indigenous children or youth. But last year, Indigenous people accounted for at least 85% of the reviewable deaths. Of those, just under half were part of the authority, consisting of several Southern First Nations.
The foundational factors are poverty. That's just it's clear cut. The compounded issues are the addictions that we're seeing now, the methamphetamines, that sort of drugs creeping into our communities, the inability of our peoples to find a way out of that addiction.
Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels says the child welfare system alone cannot address years of systemic racism that led to the high number of Indigenous youth in care.
It's going to take collaboration among institutions of government. It can't be just child welfare. It has to be the health system. It has to be education. It has to be recreation. Every child from the moment they're born should have a support system in place that evolves and is dynamic and changes, but is all about supporting the child.
In Ontario, the number of youth who have died while receiving care is typically and quietly posted on the coroner's website every year. However, the province just recently provided APTN data for the last 2 years after refusing for months. From 2013 to today, 172 children died with society involvement in the province. Since the pandemic hit in March, 11 Indigenous kids connected to the child welfare system died. Former Ontario Children's Advocate Irwin Ellman said the number is unacceptable.
And these are children who the state has intervened to protect them. So at minimum, the state needs to say, the government needs to say, something is not right. Something is not working. We must do better. Our children must survive our attempts to protect them. How about that as an outcome?
The NDP in Ontario have called for an emergency investigation into the deaths there. In Manitoba, the Advocate's office says the number of deaths in the first quarter of 2020 is consistent with the number of deaths during the same period last year. There have also been demands to defund the child welfare system, similar to calls to defund police across the country. Penrose believes there needs to be a shift in traditional child welfare practices.
And so I think it has to do with changing how services are delivered, making sure that the people who are delivering them understand how to help families, how to work with families as the expert.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A plan to redesign the child welfare system was released in Ontario earlier this week. But some child advocates are questioning its lack of detail, especially because no funding to implement the changes was announced. Jill Dunlop is Associate Minister of Children and Women's Issues. She announced that the child welfare in the province would move from the protection to prevention by shifting investments to a community-based approach while improving residential settings and focusing on kinship agreements and foster care. but the lack of funding concerns our One Child advocate.
The responsibility that's going to be downloaded onto communities leaves communities to their own devices to figure out how to do this. There's no leadership there. For me, it tells me, as I always suspected, that this project was not about children and families. It was about cost savings.
We have to take a quick break. When we come back, story time just got better. We take you to Quebec, where some classic children's books got a new look. What do Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, The Itsy Bitsy Spider, and You Are My Sunshine have in common? Well, for the first time, they've been translated into Mohawk language and published as baby books. For children in Ganawage and beyond, Lindsay Richardson reports.
An old tune sung in an even older language. It's the Itsy Bitsy Spider, sung in the Mohawk language of Ganyageha, one book in a series of 3 now available to children in Ganawage, thanks to a local publishing house.
So this is the result of 2 years of hard work, and I can't tell you how proud we are.
Also available, Odisto Odisto, or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and Agerakwa, You Are My Sunshine, all illustrated by local artists. Using a makeshift drive-through system to respect COVID-19 guidelines, the books were handed out for free to parents and their babies.
It's really nice. A lot of them are in the cars, and seeing their faces light up and we hand it to them, and knowing that it's something that they can manipulate and handle themselves.
Yorun Yahawi Macomer is a coordinator at the Ganawage Language Nest, an immersion space where mothers and children converse only in Ganyageha. Mohawk nursery rhymes used to be sung aloud and were never committed to writing until now.
You have to get the tune in mind, and our words are so much longer than the English, so we have to make the words fit into a tune that is sung with English words. So that's a process in itself.
A bright shiny star in heaven.
Katari Deer didn't have books like these as a young girl.
When we were going to school, we weren't allowed to talk our language. If we spoke it, you got scolded.
As an adult, she'd go on to teach it.
It welcomes us. Maybe the sky and the stars.
One of the books is now dedicated to her. Deer says her parents sustained the language at home despite pressure in school.
The first thing my mom said to us, I don't care what kind of language you learn today. In this house we speak Mohawk. Because if I don't understand what you're saying, you ain't getting what you want.
With fewer than 3,500 speakers left, the Mohawk language is considered endangered, though more tools exist now than ever. There are first language children's shows like Doda de Nanagwari and study guides published in the weekly paper.
I don't want to get emotional.
But speaking about the baby books, project coordinator Jody Jacobs says she wanted to share the language the way a once beloved teacher did, through song.
I just thought that my grandchildren should learn that way as well.
They may be 3 small cardboard books, but together they're marking a new chapter in Mohawk language revitalization. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Ganawage, Mohawk Territory.
Time for a short break. When we come back, a new $2 coin has been released that honors an influential Haida artist. More details when we return. A memorial pole will be raised on the Highway of Tears in northern BC. It's to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women and be a place for families to remember their lost loved ones. Lee Wilson has more.
We have so many other family members that have gone missing along this Highway of Tears.
Wanda Good is one of the organizers who has been working on the commemoration memorial pole. She's a member of the APTN Nation. In the late 80s and 90s, she had 2 cousins go missing. Alberta Williams was found murdered outside of Prince Rupert along Highway 16. Lana Derrick has never been found since going missing from Terrace. Good has been an MMIW advocate with a message.
The reason that Gladys and I have taken up this work is not just because of our loss, but to really tell the story of our sisters, our mothers, our granddaughter, our niece, our cousin, and to let the world know that these women are somebody.
Wanda Good and Gladys Raddick are fellow advocates, organizing awareness walks throughout BC, which led to them traveling across Canada. They have taken part in provincial and national inquiries. The MMIW families form a network of strength and support for one another. Raddick remembers the moment her family member went missing in 1995.
When my niece Marilyn Chipman disappeared, it just kind of knocked the breath out of me when other families started approaching me and telling me about their loved ones, and we started compiling a database, and it was way higher than what the police were saying.
The family of Chipman, fishermen, and firefighters organized their search on the highway between Prince Rupert and Terrace, BC for 6 days. She was never found. Arlene Roberts has worked for the Indian Residential School Survivor Society for 20 years. She remembers the grief among those searching, which is how the highway earned its name.
When we started calling it the Highway of Tears, because when they were searching for Tamara, her family, the aunts and uncles and friends, were crying.
Raddick and Good estimate 57 family members have gone missing on the Highway of Tears, which is a section of highway that runs between Prince George and Prince Rupert. 4 years ago, organizers had discussions of building a pole.
The idea of the totem pole came to me because I wanted a place on the Highway of Tears where our families could go and visit this pole in a peaceful way, spending a little bit of time there with prayers, honoring their loved ones.
In their meeting with funders, Women and Gender Equality Canada, they found out they would need to have a carver on board. So they put a call out to artists. It was Robert's son, Mike D'Angeli, who answered the call.
Mike D'Angeli was the only one who showed up. And we almost like all went up and hugged him right as soon as he walked in the door.
D'Angeli is a Northwest artist who has carved over 20 totem poles. He will have the support of his wife, who will assist in raising it. 2 of his adult sons have already helped with the carving. As a father, he felt it was important to get behind such a good cause.
Learning to be a better human being so that my sons could be good people in the community, that they could be called upon when asked to do things for their community. So I'm leading by example, and I'm really working for that for my children. But I also do that with my nieces and nephews by leading by example.
She represents our grandmothers. She represents our moms and our aunties.
The totem pole will be raised off of Highway 16 near Kitsilkalem, BC. They are grateful to the local First Nations community and the BC Ministry of Transportation for giving them a space. Organizers found it was a challenge to find a location because a totem pole is a statement.
No more. We're taking responsibility for our own people. We're looking after them. We are not disposable. We're saying all of this.
We'll honor LGBTQ, stolen sisters and brothers, and as well as non-Indigenous that have gone missing. In early September, they will raise the pole and have it blessed by Kitsilkalem chiefs and matriarchs. Due to the pandemic, there will be a limit of 50 guests. The event will be live streamed for those who can attend to tune in to hear the message.
This is why we call it the Commemoration Memorial and Healing Pole, because it's to commemorate those who have gone before us. It's to acknowledge your soul and spirit that we see you. We see you.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Terrace.
A university in British Columbia will make history this fall when the province's first Indigenous female Chancellor assumes office. APTN's Sarah Connors takes a look at the new Chancellor's triumphs and tribulations and how they've led to her most recent success.
Kim Baird will make history this fall when she becomes Chancellor of Kwantlen Polytechnique University. It's KPU's first time bestowing the prestigious honor to an Indigenous person. It's also a first for British Columbia. When Baird becomes Chancellor on October 5th, she'll be the first Indigenous woman ever to hold the title in the province.
I hope to do the role justice, and I hope I can be a good role model for youth and others who don't have things figured out necessarily, right? So yeah, it is a huge honor, and it does feel good to be the first both woman and Indigenous person in that role.
A KPU alumni, Baird is best known for being the former chief of Tsawwassen First Nation from 1999 to 2012. During her tenure, she oversaw the first modern treaty in BC, which led Tsawwassen to greater self-government and economic development. Now in business for herself as a consultant, Baird credits her success to KPU.
I got an Associate of Arts there, and it actually awoke my political consciousness and led me on the path I am now to advancing a land claim for my community.
But Baird's path to success wasn't easy. She attended 8 schools before graduating high school and witnessed family violence and alcoholism as a child.
Really didn't see a future for myself, didn't have a lot of hope. So when I graduated high school, it was kind of surprising that I did, because I was completely disillusioned and all that kind of stuff. But I had a lot of community support and almost a pressure, I think, to do something.
Now, she hopes to use her achievements and her own experiences to encourage Indigenous youth to pursue higher education. And she hopes her new role can be used to bring attention to Indigenous issues.
I hope to use the role to advance Indigenous reconciliation for KPU specifically, but to convene discussions amongst post-secondary institutions more broadly. If I can use my capacity to convene important discussions about the way forward in Canada, I think it'd be a good use of the role.
And as a mother to 3 school-age daughters, her dream is for them to someday become strong leaders of their own.
These are all important small steps in this country, and I'm excited for my daughter's future too.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Richmond.
The Royal Canadian Mint has unveiled a new $2 coin honoring legendary Haida artist Bill Reid. The coin depicts the image of a grizzly bear, a favorite character of Reid's paintings, carvings, and jewelry. It marks the 100th anniversary of Reid's birth and celebrates the artist's groundbreaking contribution to contemporary Indigenous art. Reid played a pivotal role in raising awareness of Haida art and the traditions and culture it represents. The commemorative coin was limited to 3 million coins. 2 million of them will feature the Haida grizzly bear design. That's your APTN National News for this weekend. Keep up to date with the breaking news on the APTN app or visit aptn.ca.